Why do disabled people tend to be viewed as non-sexual? I would imagine it's partially due to ignorance and partially because people assume those with certain disabilities can't physically have sex, and therefore suppress or don't have those feelings. Ignorance. I'm a great example. Up until my late 20s, I thought that a man in a wheelchair must not be able to have sex, and therefore did not ever think about sex, until I made a friend who was disabled. Then he met a girl, who also used a wheelchair by the way, and started confiding in me about their date nights. Let me tell you, I felt like a complete idiot and still do when I think about it. I'm an ex-sex worker, and my partner is a wheelchair user, who has found a small, but positive, following on Chatterbait. I admit, the first time I met them, I did think that typical PIV sex may be different for them, as I didn't know the details of their disability. But I never thought they'd not be sexual, as I had a variety of disabled clients in the past. I can't count the amount of times people have assumed I'm their support worker. Even other disabled people think this automatically, as though disabled people aren't expected to be in relationships. I think some of it comes down to people not knowing if a disabled person can have sex in the same way that they have sex at least, and some of it is the viewing of disabled people as childlike. I'm sorry you've experienced this firsthand. It's no doubt a constant frustration. Edit spelling. Not disabled. I'm a therapist and mobility equipment vendor. But I think disabled people are viewed as being non-sexual because disability is infantilized. If someone views a disabled person in an infantilized way, they're immediately going to think of them as not having a sexuality. If I swiped on a disabled person online, I'd be more interested in them if they included pictures of themselves living their best life, whatever that might be, and also if their personality shone through. If I was meeting someone, I'd want to know ahead of time what would and wouldn't be on the table for a date so I could help plan and not assume their abilities. Edit. Hit save too early. You have to consider, growing up, people don't consider their parents as sexual beings, even though that's how we get here. Young guys raised in many cultures lead to imagine that their female partners were not sexual beings before meeting them. There's a lot of silly sexual assumptions that people make. I once dragged a lady in a wheelchair up a set of 9 stairs so we could have a few hours of wild, unbridled, passionate sex. Good times. I am a relatively able-bodied partner to a very obviously disabled woman, and I have heard this from her many times. And not just sexuality, but also drug use and heavy music. Do they just expect us to sit at home, do homework and drool? She says. And the best suggestion that I can give is to find a situation where a person can get to know your personality devoid of your disability. First, we got to know each other on the internet before video chat was a thing. We spoke for 6 months before she said she uses a wheelchair. My reply was just, so? Because it was such a minor thing compared to the rest of what I knew about her. Though it did explain a few things I found odd. Ignorance more than anything, I think. As a teen, I assumed anyone in a wheelchair had no feeling in their legs, which is obviously stupid. But that fed into thinking that if they can't feel their legs, they mustn't be able to get aroused, so probably don't have sex. Obviously my thinking on that changed very quickly, but for some folks they go into adulthood still believing it, and then they extend that thinking to all sorts of disabilities. Ever thought of getting a shirt that says I've got SMA and I'm DTF? I'm disabled too, and in my experience, the world tends to infantilize us in many ways all the time. Hell, last week my partner got asked if I was his mom or sister. We are 4 months apart age-wise and his hair is graying mine ISN 5T. No one who is not making ableist assumptions could mistake us as relatives. We look nothing alike. This is far from the only time people have assumed I am incapable of romance or sex. Once, even while I was visibly pregnant by my then partner. I honestly think that we just don't know how disabled people had sex. Like which positions they would do, etc. It's not really talked about. I work in healthcare, so these are kinda generalized observations. I think most people are surprised that disabled people have the same desires and wants as a non-disabled person. The easiest example I can think of is a blind person wanting to wear makeup. Some people say, why would they want that if they can't see themselves anyways? Blind people would still care about their appearance. When people thinking of sex and disability, they more so think, is this person actually capable of performing sex? Particularly if it's quite a prominent physical disability. Many people thinks it impedes their ability to perform sexual activities. They may assume disabled person may not be an active participant in sex, which can be off-putting. I read an interesting article from a sex worker whose client base is a lot of disabled people. She said a lot of her clientele were shy and discouraged because people don't want to take the time or effort to be intimate with them. She taught her clientele what they could do with their physical capabilities. I don't know what the extent of your physical condition is, and I've been out of the dating scene for a very long time, so I don't have a lot of advice on that end. But unfortunately, I think the best thing is to be patient and educate people. Ableism. Unfortunately, people infantilize people with disabilities, which takes away the ability to see them in a sexual light. I don't have any meaningful advice. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I think a lot of people see a person using a wheelchair or other walking aid and assume you have no feeling below the waist, and therefore wouldn't be interested in sex. Agree also that disabled people are often infantilized. When I was younger, I fell into the common thought process that ignorantly assumed it either wasn't thought about or a possibility. I was talking to a man that had been in an accident and was wheelchair bound. Unfortunately, our schedules never aligned to meet in person, but once the connection and the sexual attraction was there, I didn't look at him any differently than I would have a man that wasn't disabled. The attraction and connection started the same as it would have with anyone else. There is a guy on TikTok I have a huge crush on that has cerebral palsy. There's also a comedian I love with it as well, Josh Blue. Both these guys are hilarious because people infantilize disabled people. I think there's also a distinction to be made between physically disabilities and mental disabilities. While I do agree a lot of the latter is based in ignorance, there's some truth in the former. Working with people with mental disabilities, such as autism, Engelmann's, etc., tend to have either hypersexuality or more often no sexual interest whatsoever. For them, there's often an underdevelopment of sexual organs, or they may not make the sexual correlation between their needs and achieving that with a partner. But yeah, mostly ignorance and people feeling uncomfortable talking about it. I'm done cases. It's because they didn't think of disabled people as people, or they don't hire them as adults. You know how a lot of people will push people's wheelchairs without asking? Yeah, same reason. Self-defense. People having sex with a disabled person, or thinking of it, are often labeled as predators, perverts. I am not a disabled person, but I have thought about it quite a bit and feel that everyone should have the right to a sexual life and sexual dignity. It is a need and desire like any other, and is really important to a good quality of life. I feel like people shy away from this topic since sex is such a taboo in general. I think that more should be done to ensure there are programs and assistance given to people with disabilities who want to have sex or need sexual assistance both medically and socially. I wonder how we could more strongly advocate for this.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.